Hello, everybody, and welcome to the cold opening section. This is Tim, your one of your local co-hosts. I'm here with Daniel today, and we're going to get in. Sorry, we're going to get into our episode, but we kind of wanted to preface our new intro, which is orchestrated by me. I spent about most of the last weekend trying to put together an orchestrated version because I'm over here and I don't have a work permit yet, so I've applied for that and I'm just working away. So I worked really hard to make an orchestrated version of our theme, and this is what I came up with, and I'm quite proud of it. So I hope you enjoy.
Very good.
Yeah, we'll be cutting it down to a slightly shorter version, probably, so you don't have to listen through the whole thing.
Or maybe do the full one just this once, and then
exactly.
Never again.
Mm-hmm. Never.
Like, yeah, you gotta be a real fan to find the uncut version of the theme.
Yeah, we could probably put like a download link or something for the full version if you want to download it. That would be cool.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Use it as your theme tone.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet. So, without further ado, here is the lovely new theme song. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Villain Squad episode 3. Villain Squad is an interstitial podcast that we do between episodes of Creature Club, mostly because one of us is missing or dead or in the Phantom Zone or banished into the Shadow Realm or whatever it might be. This week it's Mikey. He played a game with a guy. He didn't realize it was a shadow game and he wasn't playing his best deck. So he didn't win, which is a shame. But that's fine because he'll be back by the next episode. I'm Daniel, and if you were confused by that opening, you have every right to be. And I am joined by my co-host Tim.
Hello, I'm Tim.
This is a podcast about talking about villains because everyone knows the best part of a good D&D game is the villains. That's not true, but it's a nice thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so we sort of talk about villains and maybe like why they're motivated to do the bad things they do, how that might play with the characters, what kind of cool abilities we could come up with, maybe a structure for their leadership so that we have kind of a nice, a fun like hit list, sort of like the hit video game Crackdown, where there was kind of a big list of baddies and you had to kind of take them out one by one. It was like, ooh, you got that guy. Now the main bad guy doesn't have his best car or whatever. So like that kind of idea.
Or like in the Shadow of Mordor, where there's just tier after tier of bad guys, and they just
wave
keep
after
replacing
wave.
each other. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we will be focusing on the kind of the structure of the Assassin's Guild this week.
Indeed.
We're going to see kind of where the episode takes us, but the plan generally is to kind of come up with something that maybe by the end of the episode you might want to include an Assassin's Guild in your game, and you might have ideas about how they operate in your world.
Yeah, like I have one in my world, and I'm going to have it interacting with the world around my players as they do their thing, and they can ignore whatever happens. They can things will be happening, and they can judge for themselves whatever it was, or I'll have the police tell them that there was some foul play. And like an Assassin's Guild is quite a cool and potentially like kind of scary thing to have in the world, because like people being assassinated is never a good time.
Correct, especially for the person being assassinated.
Yeah.
So we both have existing Assassin's Guild in our sort of settings. So I think this, just to get it, let's get a general definition down, maybe just to start.
Sure.
So an Assassin's Guild in difference to maybe a Thieves Guild or just a normal group of bad guys, I think the key factors that define an Assassin's Guild are they generally go after people who are kind of valuable targets. So that might be like lords or barons or like wealthy merchants or diplomats, sort of like people in positions of power and influence. They generally do so for a high price. They generally would do so often because of another party paying them or promising them some sort of favor. It's very much a transactional sort of sort of operation.
It's possible that they could have people that they have in their guild trying to become higher in society, and they might assassinate for their own dealings because they have that power at their hands and they've gotten away with it in the past.
Very true, yeah.
I think that using that to their advantage would definitely be a very legitimate way for that power to be used for their betterment.
Yeah.
So assassinating for worth, essentially, like for someone else or for themselves, I think. And I think that another tenet that they could have would be that the kind of entrance process should be difficult. Like it shouldn't necessarily be that you have to be like the sneaky assassin. Like, I mean, of course, everybody wants the secret assassinations guild to be kept secret, but there has to be kind of like a swearing in at the end of like some form of test, I think.
There's an initiation involved, and maybe even there's an element of training because assassins have a very specialized set of skills. You're made aware of things like anatomy and even things like, diseases and poisons that you could use to remove targets from positions of power. So with all that in mind, so I think it's generally fair to say that the main reason that an Assassin's Guild will kind of run afoul of a party or vice versa is because either someone powerful wants the party gotten rid of, which is which is very common,
very likely.
It seems kind of inevitable that part of playing D&D is upsetting someone more powerful than you. So they might do that. So that might be kind of very nothing personal, where the assassins are purely interested in the party because they are being paid quite a lot of money to kill them. Or it could be very much the opposite, where the party have in some way wronged or shamed the actual Assassin's Guild themselves, maybe by besting a member or taking a contract that was supposed to be theirs, like like the party themselves assassinating someone that the Assassin's Guild had already agreed to do. So
or they make themselves enough of a nuisance consistently enough that they are worth taking out for the betterment of the actual guild itself.
Yeah, actually, very good point. Yeah, like even if like they haven't necessarily pissed off anyone in particular, if they're maybe cleaning up the streets, and making the city a safer place to live, that doesn't really work for the assassins. That's not really in their interest necessarily. Well, it depends. Exactly. Sometimes they might be more philosophical about it and say, well, if there's more prosperity, there's more powerful people, and then in the long run, those powerful people are going to want people killed. But definitely,
like a powerful person might want someone killed. Like if you want to play it kind of classically, like that person is going to be evil. So if your party encounters this big evil bad, like this big evil king, I think that it's fair to say that person will likely be a patron of the Assassin's Guild. And if this Assassin's Guild patron is knocked down a couple notches, they won't have a revenue stream. So that's interrupting their work. So
that's very true.
They could be visited by a member, or they could have an attempt on a person in their party who was kind of a figurehead of an attack or of a kind of overthrowing. So I think the Assassin's Guild would probably be very precise with it. They'd find a person who would hopefully like dismantle whatever the party was going on, like maybe a leader of sorts. like the paladin, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, in that sense, it's interesting because they are so sort of when the assassins, if or when the assassins go after the party, it'll be a lot different to maybe when they're fighting monsters or even thugs or whatever, because there's a very different motivation involved. It's not so much about like we're doing battle. It's like, no, I'm here to like specifically kill one of you, or maybe all of you if I can pull it off, kind of thing.
Yeah, like there's probably going to be a drastic shift in tone, probably from the DM. Like, I think that it's well and good to just have fun all the time with your characters, but to give them at least a little bit of a sense of like, this is business to this dude, Bibness. I'm getting into bibness now. So I think it is kind of without question that there would be a definite shift in tone, that is worth noting, with either like maybe they have this kind of aura about them through maybe an item that they have that kind of causes everything else to go quiet in the area. Like they have like a cone of quiet essentially, but like an aura of quiet, or something like that. That would be a cool thing to have as like an initiate's gift.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and just everybody in the guild has one.
It's very easy to get a night's sleep here because everyone's so quiet.
Yeah. All that comes out is just the voices, which I think it would become like, that's a very nice way to make things just become very eerie. Like, if you are a DM who likes to describe, like, as you're walking, there's lots of birds and trees rustling and like the wind blowing through the bushes and like giving the world sound, like trying to immerse your players, telling them that like somebody with passive perception quite high might notice that there has been a sudden transition into a kind of quieter space, like they would notice that and they'd be like, something's off here, like make them realize that something is different.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think like, I guess it also depends on how you want to depict your assassins, because they might also be kind of they might, like, your campaign might already suit assassination, intrigue, and politics, depending on what it is.
That's fair.
But shall we get to sort of maybe who this villain squad is? The party,
sure.
Okay. Party are, let's go ahead and set some ground rules just to make it, possible, because obviously D&D is a wonderfully diverse game. But that would make our advice almost completely useless if we didn't sort of try to apply some kind of reasonable filter.
Yeah.
So why don't we say that this Assassin's Guild is maybe, at least initially, their influence is limited to a city or a number of urban centers, because I feel like generally, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I do generally feel like assassins and assassinations suit kind of city and urban
environment
more than they would like the wilderness, even though obviously it's relatively easy to assassinate someone out in the wilderness, but like at that stage it's more like banditry, like
yeah. Well, I think that the center essentially of the Assassin's Guild would definitely be city based. Like that's where the concentration of money and wealth and people would be in the world. So the assassinations themselves would probably take place either outside the city or at like an opportune location. So definitely to have the base be urban or like based in a single area is a good idea, just to kind of give it a grounding in reality.
Okay, cool. So the assassins operate primarily in the city, whatever city it is.
Okay.
Let's see. What kind of stronghold do you think an Assassin's Guild has?
Well, I think that they would be underground for sure. Like, I don't think it's like a very publicly faced business. I think this is definitely either reserved for the like higher echelons, or like completely hidden. Like, you have to have underground connections to get any connection to it. So I think that their stronghold would be either like beneath the nobles district, or like not necessarily like, oh, they work from the sewers. Like, this is probably like a beautiful place that has been carved out by previous generations of people who had this political intrigue and this need for an assassin's guild.
Oh, that's kind of, I like that a lot. So we're saying this is like an old city, old enough that it's built upon its own ruins, right? Like, it used to be whatever, 100 years ago, it used to be like a couple of feet lower, and like if you dig down, all you get is more city. So, and like, especially obviously, we can assume that the nobles district has probably been there for one of the longest times, because it's probably the nicest part of the city. So we can say very comfortably, like, oh yeah, like, you can go whatever, like quarter of a mile under the noble district, and you're still digging through more city.
So like, and through that, the city probably looks like a mountain.
Yeah.
So there is huge depth to the center of this city.
So
like, in my world, I've built cities into mountains, but I've never built a mountain out of a city. So that's a cool idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the case with, like, I think, for example, like London. You dig under London, you just found more London. And like, famously, like a lot of Victorian era houses, when they dug their basements, they used like this machine to dig them, but the machine was so cumbersome that a lot of the time they would just bury it in the basement rather than bothering to dig it out again, because it just wasn't worth the effort. So cool. So we got this old city, and under the nobles district, it's just more city for miles and miles and miles, and maybe the part that people might be familiar with, they might say it's the catacombs, right? It connects to the churches. It's where the dead are buried, or where the bones of the dead are left, like after no one else is waiting for them. So like, I don't think it's done historically anymore. So I don't think it's done presently, but I know historically it was like you were buried, and then when you were like gone and nobody was looking at your gravestone, you were dug up so that someone else could have your spot, and then your bones were put in the catacombs, because the idea was like you would have rotted away, because like, coffins weren't meant to keep you forever. They were just meant to put you in the ground for a while, and like the worms would eat you, and then there'd be nothing but bones left, so they'd take those and put them in the catacombs. But like the boons. So that's cool. So maybe like the common folk, they know about the catacombs under the city, and that the church uses them to hold bones of old people who are long since forgotten. But like, they don't want to go there because it's full of bones, and it's creepy, and it's dark, and it's full of rats, and like, why would you ever need to go down there unless you're a rag and bone man, or maybe you're like, you're an acolyte or something like that. So most people have nothing to do with the catacombs, but they certainly know they exist. And then better informed people can tell you that, like, there are people other than priests down there who operate out of that place because there's so much room. And so I love this idea of like, this massive, like, probably larger than a lot of actual noble mansions, this like massive structure. And it's probably made out of like 3 or 4 old structures all blended together, and like with walls knocked through and new pillars built to support the structure and everything.
Because like the support structures below would have to be much stronger to continue maintaining the buildings above, so they could be built into that, or like the pillars would be built through the buildings potentially. I'm getting really cool images with this.
Just this weird, like, almost like it's almost like if you combined like 2 Lego houses or whatever, and you're not quite taking either into account, but you end up with this weird, like, asymmetrical, like, urban environment made up of loads of broken up different pieces, like slotted back together, but none of them quite right, which is pretty cool and kind of weird and like sort of out of sync and appropriate for kind of this, group who operate in the shadows outside of the legal code, and maybe the environment is just something that they want to manipulate so they can kill people or whatever.
I feel like their name should be something to do with like a graveyard, like the name of this group when they are referenced. It could be like, I'm trying to think of like, what's the word for like the grave that is basically like a house, like a door, like a mausoleum.
Mausoleum.
Yeah, we could, like, they could be called like the Maws, which also has to do with like Jaws. Oh, that's so good. We could call them, yeah, they're the maws.
So what if we call them, like the grave maws?
Oh, yeah. That's cool. Grave maws. Is it spelled MAWS or MAUS? It's just the grave maws. Shut up.
I mean, like, yeah, nobody spells it. Everyone just says it. Like, why would they? What paperwork are they going to sign with their names on it?
Anybody who sees something that has that written on it, like who is part of it, is just going to be like, all right, this person was an idiot and left a paper trail, so
yeah,
they do not deserve our attention.
Okay, so so it's a guild of assassins. It operates under the city. Yes. So I think it's fair to say that our chief person is going to be called the guild master. Like that'll be their title. Like not necessarily that's what they're called, but that's like their title, right? They'll be Guild Master X or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they could be, or their like name could be like a reference to the like the actual name. So like because they're the Grave Maws, the Guild Master could be the Grand Maw.
Ooh. Yeah.
And sort of like that's a symbolic title for the fact that they are sort of top of the pecking order.
Yeah. It's a shame there isn't like a hierarchy to gravekeepers. It's usually just a gravekeeper and then like his dog or whatever. Oh, there's the groundskeeper. They're like the animal. I wonder. No, there's no word for a gravekeeper's dog.
There's not a specific word for a gravekeeper's dog, or if there is, we don't know it.
I'm trying to think of like cool titles that we could give to some of our villains.
So we've got the Grand Master or the Grand Maw, who's the Guild Master of the Grave Maws. Is it fair to say they're just like a 15th level rogue, just like super high level, really really dangerous, very clever, very like experienced, probably actually like older, you know what I mean? Like if they're say human, they might be in their 50s or 60s. If they're like elven or half elven, they might be in the latter years of their life, but that just means they've got so much more experience to call on.
Yeah. The experience and the wit and the guile that a person needs to be the head of an organization like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that they're like, would they go out in public as themselves, or do you think that they are this kind of graying, kind of pasty pale, like they have become like basically a grey, like a corpse essentially under the ground?
Oh,
or do you
that's
think that
interesting.
they are this, like your expectation would be that, but should we like subvert that by having them be just this person that wanders around, like are they a person that the party knows maybe?
Yeah, I suppose that's an interesting question. Like, is it, I mean, I suppose, so let's say that if they do just live underground, there's nothing else we can talk about. So let's say for just for the purposes of an exercise and trying to build sort of a person and a villain that our listeners can use. Let's say that they do operate in the world. So like, what kind of role do you think they have? Like, so we can assume that maybe as Grand Maw they wear a mask, or you could even sort of play with the idea that they're this powerful high level person, and sort of say that like they don't actually physically change, but their sort of they have an ability to like shift identities. So almost like they consciously choose who to be, either their like external persona or the Grand Maw, and like even like their most stalwart acolytes wouldn't identify them in a ballroom because they're so effective at it, because obviously they are the ultimate assassin.
Right.
Sort of like Hitman. You know the way in Hitman you can like take disguises and nobody ever recognizes you as Hitman, or goes, "You don't work here. I know everyone who works here." Like
what's
no
with
one
that serial number on the back of your neck?
Literally no one is ever able to put two and two together, because you're just presumably like
just that good.
I think the idea is that in the fiction of the world you are a very convincing liar, even though it's fucking stupid. It's fine because all games are stupid.
Well, we have magic in this world, so
exactly.
So they are just magically incredible.
But like that's the thing. Like, are we saying that it's magic, or are we saying like Hitman? It is not magic. It's actually
just his pure natural charisma.
Exactly. It is literally like it's almost a function of charisma. It's a function of like their plus 15 to deception or whatever. That like they are like, I have this other persona and I can adopt it, and no one will see through my ruse. And it doesn't matter that I haven't put on makeup or changed my outfit, because like I am a convincing enough liar that like they can't see through me.
Yeah.
So
in world that might be a little tricky to play as the DM.
Well,
Like you meet the bread man and he looks like this, and then you meet the postman and he looks exactly the same, but you don't notice.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you just say like, if you just give a description of what they look like, if you say, oh, you know, you meet Talasy Grimdalen, he's like a lesser noble of the second house. He's a sort of an older man, graying, like not much hair. Seems like he might have shaved his head deliberately. Kind of dull eyes. He doesn't really seem like he's all there, because we can assume that there's an element of he's trying to appear as something as well. So maybe he tries to look sort of disinterested, like he can deliberately look like someone who you don't want to talk to. You know what I mean?
He's a master of blending in where he needs to be,
and like almost like he can like he's a master of like his own body language and like what he exudes. So like when he's the Grand Maul, he's like powerful and persuasive, and like everyone listens when he talks. But like when he's, you know, Tallahassee, fucking nobody cares. Everyone talks over him all the time. He sort of mumbles or stumbles over his words and like doesn't seem like he's paying attention even to himself. And even that idea that like this is an act because he's a very good actor. Like, you know, you could even play into that and say that he's got like 15 in deception and he's got, you know, 17 in performance, so that he can really easily just adopt other roles. But like the idea that like this is not magic, this is someone who is very good at what they are doing because they have been doing it for 50 years. And like
raw animal magnetism.
Raw sexual power. He gets at his big dom.
Every character into thinking he is whatever he wants them to think he is. He's the ultimate dom.
Or the ultimate sub, which makes him the ultimate dom.
Yeah. Oh my god. Such power.
He's the ultimate power bottom. So yeah, that idea that like, I mean, and I'm saying you can't use magic, but my point, I suppose, is that
I like that as like a this core character to this Assassin's Guild. The Assassin's Guild, that is, as its simplest, is a group of people that kills people in relative secrecy, and for the head honcho to be that as like just pure raw power in that regard is kind of perfect, I think. So that's a really, really good shout, Dan.
Thank you. So that would be cool. Like the idea that maybe like, and you could even play into that slightly and have it that like maybe, you know, I guess depending on what kind of guild you want to build, you could say that maybe the guild kind of, they don't necessarily like, you know, they would use magic items, but maybe they have kind of a code of like, you should never have to rely on magic to get your job done. Yeah. And maybe that's a consequence of this guild master, right? Because they don't rely on magic. Maybe they have a magic dagger that makes them a little better at stabbing people, like the dagger of venom, which we actually did in a recent treasure trove episode.
Indeed.
You know, something like that would be very appropriate for an assassin. But the idea that like maybe as a point of pride, this guild master sort of says like, we can kill whoever we need and we don't need magic to do it. And in a way that's almost interesting, because you can then have the idea that like, you know, a lot of sort of one of the things about magic is that it's, you know, easier to detect. There's spells like detect magic and identify and like locate magic and stuff like that like make it easier for parties to find people if they rely on magic. So like if they stop doing that, if they stop playing in that field, if they're like, oh, I've just got maybe a magic dagger, or maybe I don't, that suddenly like it's so much harder for the party to identify an assassin versus a normal thug.
With that kind of thing, I think that they will train up their other people, because to go into the world of magic without magic is, I don't know, I feel like that would be a little bit upsetting to me as a DM, but it's also like super cool idea. Like a lot of the time, like if a character uses their detect magic spell consistently, like they know they're in a magic world and things will be magical that they can't perceive, then they're going to use that and they're just going to see through everything and go thing there, thing there, thing there. But if you do have the like non-magic stuff, that will be like hyper effective, because like the assassins will know that everybody knows magic. Like
Yeah.
magic is throughout the world. So if they can detach themselves from it to a certain extent while remaining deadly efficient and
Yeah.
like striking murderously is like a huge boon to them. But I wouldn't say they'd like turn away magic
Yeah.
users necessarily.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's the thing. I wouldn't say that they necessarily like they don't allow magic. It would be more like maybe their training, their kind of assassin training, it doesn't focus at all necessarily on magic for the most part. So maybe like most of their members are, like not necessarily. We don't have to use PC classes because they're not PCs.
Yeah.
But that idea that they focus more on just like, I'm just really good at sneaking and hiding, and I'm good with a knife. And, if you were to use the assassin NPC from the monster manual, they have like, sneak attack, and I think they have cunning action. And like so obviously they're stealing rogue class features because they're appropriate for an assassin. But they don't have all of them because that would just fucking Jesus. Like
Be impossible.
Yeah, like
if we're saying they're level 15, at level 14 they get blind sense. The definition is if you are able to hear, you are aware of the location of any hidden or invisible creature within 10 feet of you. And at level 15 they get slippery mind, which is you have acquired greater mental strength, you gain proficiency in wisdom saving throws. Like that's pretty handy, for this big guy to be able to like potentially like escape or wiggle out of whatever. What causes a wisdom saving throw?
A lot of spells, compel duel,
charm
for
stuff.
Example.
Yeah,
charm person.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of things.
So like to be able to wiggle out of it or to play into it would be pretty cool. Although if somebody wiggles out of one of those, the caster usually knows. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Of course.
we can definitely work outside of the actual like PC like character stuff, but
Yeah.
like we can. There is a lot that can be borrowed from it, like the uncanny dodge, and the assassin has like infiltration expertise and imposter. You gain the ability to unerringly mimic another person's speech, writing, and behavior. So that's kind of leaning
It's sort of
into
appropriate. Yeah, what we were talking about already. Yeah.
I think that our grand maw is definitely this dude, this incredibly charismatic, hugely experienced middle-aged man
Sorry.
who just has this ability to kill everyone he wants. But I think he's also going to be like kind of cool and charismatic, just off the bat.
We want them to be a leader as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have this Assassin's Guild. We have a leader who's sort of very powerful without the use of any magic. That doesn't mean they don't use magic or that they don't have magical abilities or that they don't have magic items. It just means that they maybe pride themselves in not relying on them. Whether or not they actually do any assassinating themselves at this stage or leave that up to other people, or maybe commit all their time to training other assassins. Maybe we'll get to that. It might well be the case that they have reached a stage where they actually spend most of their time as their other persona gathering information, because maybe that's actually more useful for the guild. So let's work on some other assassins. Let's build up this squad a bit. Okay. So far we've only got one member.
So in my world, I have a couple, two guys who I am a big fan of, the core concept of. So there is the kind of head guy who is basically maybe he could be like the Grand Maw's foil with the regards to the magic, because my character in my world is he's a high priest of a god of murder, essentially. Okay. So for him to be in an Assassin's Guild makes sense. So he finds his devout duty in the assassination of people that his god like finds suitable. You know? So while speaking to his god, he will get these names, but he also, like, the god is probably relatively like cunning as well. So he'd produce these ideas that these people deserve to die, but also he could justify the murder of other people to this high priest of Val, because the high priest is going to take whatever their god directly says to them, you know?
Okay.
And so the high priest has, in my world, he has this basically this younger character, this vassal, who I gave a name called Zoroaster, which the name means as pure as the stars, but in my own head canon for my own world, for my actual canon, because it's not head canon, it's actual real world canon. He's this character who is pure as the stars, and had this other character, this high priest, take him under his wing and basically corrupt him. Like, he went from Zoroaster, pure as the stars, and I have him as the corrupted, essentially. Zoroaster the corrupted. Because he was supposed to be this pure soul, and like for the background of this character, I was going to have him have the potential to like rebuild a broken civilization, or like from the ground up, like start a movement to rebuild like the I'm trying not to give away too much of my world in this one, but to like rebuild basically a society for a specific people, you know?
Okay.
But he's been corrupted and sidelined by this teacher of his, by his tutor.
Okay,
And
so
I think that's a cool thing.
So I like that a lot, because we've immediately got this. We've got a lot of different power structures in play in our villain squad. So first of all, we've got our Grand Maul, who is sort of charismatic and very experienced and very dangerous, but kind of pragmatic and maybe slightly arrogant, and believes that like an assassin does not need to rely on magic. And then maybe as sort of both a guide, but also sort of as a source of information, they have this priest who this priest who has sort of some kind of connection to a god of death, and like whether this priest is kind of pulling names from a hat, or like augurying people to like learn their routines, like when they should be killed. Maybe if your setting doesn't have a god of death, it could be like that they're the god of the fates, or that the priest is actually a follower of like the fates, and the idea that like this person is destined to die at this point, so this is when you should strike. So
it's like in that movie, Wanted, they get their names out of the loom, supposedly.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Ivy just got home, so I'll be editing myself quite heavily from here.
So maybe they sort of, okay, cool. So we've got this high priest then, who's kind of who I think, interestingly, like I like the fact that maybe like the Grand Maul, let's call them the eye socket.
Okay, eye socket,
because they're the one that sees, or just the seer, if you want to go for something simpler.
Yeah, well, the seer is kind of, I guess the seer, but the eye socket is kind of a cool play on that, like a kind of like sideways step away from it.
Yeah, but
so that's cool.
Exactly. So
also gives a kind of skull imagery of death and stuff.
Exactly. Play with that grave imagery we're working with. So so this cleric, maybe they can, see the future, or they can guide their assassins, and even something as simple as the fact that they have access to, healing magics, so that if the assassin runs into more trouble than they expected, they can be like bandaged up more quickly and sent back out to do more missions, or just back into training because they're obviously not ready. So all that's pretty cool. I like all that. And I like this, but I really want to, and maybe we can crystallize this as we work through the villain squad. I really want to make a point. I really want to make a sort of flashpoint between the cleric and the Grand Maul, the guild master. I really want those two to have something specific they fight over. Some specific thing. It doesn't have to be a person, it can be anything, but like
outside of the fact that he's a magic user and that our Grand Maul isn't. Yeah,
I think that feels a little rudimentary. It almost feels like if that's the problem, he shouldn't be in the guild. You know what I mean? Like, you ultimately the guild master recruited this person. We have to assume, if they are the guild master, we have to assume that either they or the person before them has recruited this person, And if we are asserting that the guildmaster is as dangerous as they are, then they should have just killed the cleric if they didn't like the fact they were a magic user.
Yeah.
And it could be the case that maybe the guildmaster doesn't like it, but a lot of the other assassins think they're useful to have around. But the reason I don't like that is because like the cleric didn't choose to be a magic user, really. You know what I mean? Like it feels like they kind of did, because of obviously the fact that a cleric is based on your devotion to a god. But it feels more like it should be based on a decision both of them have made or an opinion both of them have. Whereas like, you know, the decision of like, I don't like that you are playing a different class that uses magic spells is a little bit like, well, that's kind of unfair, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's not something we can necessarily answer straight away. So we'll just keep that in mind as something that I think would be cool.
Yeah. Like, I don't think it needs to be like overtly said to the characters at all, so it doesn't need to have a huge amount of depth to it. But I think that the rivalry is a cool idea, that they butt heads, but I don't think it needs to have as clear cut a definition to it.
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to help one of them unseat the Grand Maw. That could be cool.
Okay, so those two, we want those two to be in conflict because that's cool and interesting and creates a power dynamic that means that the guild is acting separately to the players. And I think one of the ways that I think another cool dynamic that I really like is this second to the priest.
Yeah.
I don't know, like in terms of like sort of, you know, stripping down the specifics and making them kind of generic. I don't know exactly how we make them generic, but I do like the idea that maybe this individual kind of person is uniquely gifted in some way. Maybe we say that like they're actually a paladin of the god of death. You know, that could be interesting.
Okay.
Like that's maybe we make the point that that's really unusual, that the god of death doesn't normally take paladins for whatever reason, doesn't empower their oaths. And for some reason, this specific person has that power. And because they can't find guidance, because this is so rare, they've turned to this priest of death. But the priest of death works for an assassin's guild. So now the paladin of the god of death works for an assassin's guild. But like, not because they have that same, you know, sort of transactional, I'm going to do this thing because I'm really good at killing people. But more like they are trying to find this purpose. But that quest for purpose has led them astray. And maybe this is the conflict point. Maybe this is the reason the Grand Maw doesn't like the priest, because the priest has accepted this paladin to teach them. And maybe the paladin is actually a pretty good assassin. Maybe they have these cool, like, shadow divine powers that let them be like a really cool, maybe second only to the guildmaster, this kind of anti-paladin, or whatever we want to call them. You know, maybe like Shadow Knight is a cool name.
The Shadow Knight. We're going back to that whole flower.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
And so like maybe like, you know, second only to the Guildmaster, the Shadow Knight is the most dangerous assassin that the guild has to offer, right? The most powerful, because they have this mixture of martial talent and these unique powers bestowed to them by the God of Death that no one else has ever seen.
And maybe the Grand Maw is kind of, maybe he's a little bit flippant about it, and he'll take the big jobs and the most important ones, but he'll also take the little ones that, like, he doesn't lose touch with his kind of grassroots establishment. He's this kind of, he'll take the top ones and the bottom ones, but he will occasionally defer some of his most important jobs to the paladin, and maybe the priest isn't super into that.
Right, because the priest maybe like isn't sure. Maybe like, oh, I like that. So the guildmaster wants to use the paladin as just another assassin, whereas the priest is like, no, he should only ever act based on the words of the God of Death, because that they're paladin. That's what they should do. And so maybe that's the center of their conflict, is that, you know, to the guildmaster, an assassin should rely on their innate power and their skill as sort of, you know, their cunning and their canniness and their skill with a blade and their ability to get out of the way of danger and to spot opportunity. And then, almost as if to spit in his face, the God of Death has given him one of his most powerful servants. But of course, this servant, as well as being, you know, probably a fine assassin by all accounts, relies on this like admittedly very powerful dark magic, right? So that they can, like, you know, eviscerate people and remove their bodies from existence and all this weird stuff that means that, like, if they are sent to assassinate someone, you have guaranteed that person has been assassinated. And so maybe then, like, on jobs that are important, the guildmaster goes, well, we should give this to the Shadow Knight because it'll get done. And that upsets the priest because the priest is like, no, the god of death hasn't said to me to give him that job. And the guildmaster's sort of like, well, cool. I don't care because he works for me, right? And so maybe there's that conflict where, you know, the paladin just wants to be led by the priest because that's what he feels his place is. And maybe the party can change that by talking to him or capturing him and, you know, holding him prisoner and stuff like that and debating him over the course of days or whatever. So, like, there's this conflict where, like, one of them sees it kind of pragmatically, one of them sees it more religiously, you know, and the paladin is sort of caught in the middle. And maybe like this paladin, whoever they are, they just want to be good at what they are doing, and maybe they don't quite, you know what I mean? They're a little lost, and they really just want to find a place for themselves, and they've got this weird power they don't understand and all that stuff. So that's cool. So I like this trio so far is pretty good.
I think that's a really cool way. Like, I wouldn't have thought to use the paladin as, like, basically this pawn that both the king and queen
exactly
are fighting over.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That, like, yeah, in a way, like, it's almost like, yeah, it's like a pawn, but it's almost like it's a pawn that is one step away from reaching the other end of the board and becoming another queen. And so the king and queen are very careful about where they put it. Okay, so cool. So we've got this trio. We've got the guildmaster. We've got their second, who is a cleric of the god of death, and we've got the cleric's understudy or vassal or ward.
Yeah.
So these are all cool, but this is sort of, I think this is very much representing the absolute pinnacle of the guild. I feel like, and that's cool. Obviously, that's important, and that's what Villain Squad is about. But, like, I think maybe our next person should be like someone who more normal assassins deal with. So maybe like a headmaster or headmistress, like a teacher of some kind, you know. And I'm not saying that the guildmaster doesn't also teach, but maybe there's like, you know, there's assassinating like 101, and then like the best assassins get to go to a special class with the guildmaster, for example, or whatever.
Okay, so like an assassin tutor or like a kind of beginners, like the initiates guy.
Yeah, so like the equivalent of like a drill sergeant or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good call, to have them kind of authoritative. I was thinking of having them kind of a little bit lazy, but I don't think that would kind of work in an Assassin's Guild context. So having the drill sergeant makes a lot more sense.
I'll be 100% honest. I'm thinking like if Snape from Harry Potter was a drill sergeant is exactly what I'm thinking. Sort of like, sort of like, you know, like sort of stalking about the place, making sure all the initiates are in line.
Yeah.
Really like authoritative and like always undermining them and giving them shit for like doing stuff wrong. But like probably actually quite a good teacher. Like they probably end up knowing a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I think that's something they mentioned. Sorry, go on.
Maybe he has some like simulacra. So
that's good.
There's like a head one, but the rest of them are like constantly watching them while they're learning their stuff or teaching them everything. Like the simulacra will keep the eyes on and teach some of the lower stuff, but the head is who they all report to, and like he's the central figure, but he is definitely the most Snapey, the Snapiest of the Snapes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the idea that like sort of that whole vibe that Snape has, and especially like Alan Rickman's performance as Snape, the idea of like just sort of like whenever you're in class, you're whispering, you're terrified, you have no idea what you're gonna have to do next.
So he's kind of an oppressive force to kind of
foil absolutely
the charisma of the Grand Master again. So that also kind of works.
And I think we say that like this sort of teacher, maybe like we give them a name like Speaker or Jaw, to be like the idea that they're spreading knowledge, they're teaching the younger generations.
Yeah, or just a Maw.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
And then there's the Grand Maw. So I like that. So we have this kind of dry character who is also like emanates a kind of fearful presence. But how would we arm him, essentially? Do you think he wouldn't be an actual assassin himself? Or maybe he was like crippled by one of his assassination attempts, but he still has all this experience that he can draw on to teach.
Oh, that's good. I kind of like that, actually. I like the idea that maybe this person has like a really strong limp. And maybe that's why they need the simulacrum to keep an eye on the students. So they can't be everywhere at once, and the simulacra don't have his limp, don't have their limp.
Yeah.
So they can be wherever, the mole can't be. But the mole is still like ferociously dangerous, very perceptive, and very scary. Like,
maybe he could be a monk.
Ooh, that's cool.
Kind of idea.
Yeah.
He's kind of lost some of his dexterity in his original body, but he has I've been watching Avatar with my wife, and I'm just thinking of Ty Lee. Like,
yes,
she can like hit all of these points on a person and then just completely disarm them.
Yes, there's also a guy in Naruto who can do that too, but I cannot remember his name.
But like somebody who can, like, maybe he has an anti-magic ability
or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, I like that, actually. Yeah, that they literally do have, like, they're the master of what's a cool name for it? Like,
yeah, I'll try to think.
So unlike the idea that like you're not stealing key points, you're actually stopping their flow of magic. So
it's kind of an anti-magic cone like the Beholder had, but it has to be an activated effect that this character has. And he blocks something.
Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to think of a good name for it. Maybe like
we do.
Maybe like Sans Arcanics.
Okay.
Like sans meaning without, and arcanics being a corruption of arcane. So he's a master of sans arcanics, the ancient fighting style of reducing someone's magical powers. And
if I was in my like research mode to try to find something out, I would absolutely be looking up all of the Latin and Greek for like absence of, or like hollowness, or like emptying. So if you can find something like that, but Absentia Arcanum or something, as you said. What was it? What?
I said Sans Arcanics.
Sans Arcanics, yeah.
But that's I like cool. Absentia. That's good.
Magica in Absentia.
It could be like it could be like Eldritch Absentia.
Ooh,
that's a fun. I like that, Eldritch Absentia. So it's like a fighting style where he traps your magic power so you can't access it, and maybe in terms of mechanics, this is represented as this character like gives you disadvantage on concentration checks to maintain spells.
Yeah,
that's a nice simple way. We're using all the existing rules. We're not making up new checks or anything weird like that. We're just saying the thing that you already had to do is now harder. Yeah.
Or how about, like, because he is this magic user, there are lots of different sources for all the magic. So he will recognize where somebody's energy is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever abilities, like the paladin uses charisma for his magic, right?
Yeah.
So people will, like, because of that, they probably won't put many points into intelligence or wisdom, and maybe he can sense that. So when he tries to deactivate your ability, you will have to use like a dictated one. Like, he won't make you use like your definite lowest stat, but using your own kind of DM's intuition, you can kind of guess at whichever one is their lowest stat and make them roll one that is kind of countered to their primary abilities for a saving throw. So they wouldn't have proficiency in it, and it would be a lower stat than usual.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, I think that makes a lot of sense, but I do also think that's a lot of work.
It's a little complicated.
As a fundamentally very lazy dungeon master, I think that's a really cool idea, but I don't think I would use it.
No.
Because I would have to learn about my players' ability scores to use it against them.
Yeah. So maybe just the disadvantage is a kind of simpler tool to use. Like,
or if you want, you could have sort of a kind of hierarchy where maybe the Maw's followers have that, right? They have like Eldritch Absentia level 1, where like they give you disadvantage, and then this Grandmaster or this Maw has Eldritch Absentia level 2, which is like you get disadvantage, and then maybe you have to make a spell saving throw. So you have to make a saving throw, like, but using your kind of spellcasting ability.
Yeah,
and if you
using
fail,
your spellcasting
you
ability
lose a spell slot. He's like pulling the magic out of your body.
And you can't cast a spell next turn or something.
Actually, yeah, you could do something like that too. Yeah, and like I'd say just for ease, you'd say like, you lose your lowest level spell slot.
Ooh.
So the idea is like he's not pulling your 5th level spell, because that'd be terrible unless you've used all your other spells.
Yeah, but maybe the ability is he does this thing, and if you fail, you don't notice anything immediately. But when you try to cast your next spell, you can't.
You blow up.
It always fails. You explode.
And then you'll explode.
Yeah. It basically wastes your next magical attack, whatever it was going to be. If it was going to be your haymaker, it's going to fizzle out and be useless. But also, if you're trying to heal your friend, it won't work, and that kind of works well for the assassin part.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
prevent your abilities. I think that's kind of cool.
Or it could be that they pick a spell you have access to and you can't cast it for a while, a number of rounds or whatever.
Yeah.
So it could be like punch, punch, punch. You can't do fireball anymore, and then it's like for the next whatever minute you can't cast fireball.
Yeah.
But like you can only ever have one spell cancelled at a time, right? Just for the sake of letting a spellcaster actually play fucking D&D. But like the idea of like if you're hit with a flurry of unarmed strikes, it's like, okay, you also make a spell save throw, and if you fail, you also lose a spell slot, or maybe you fizzle your next spell, or you can't cast a certain spell is forbidden for a while. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh yeah, like maybe a specific school can't be spelled.
Ooh, that's cool. Yeah, the idea that like it cancels a school of thought, and that's even interesting because I would not be surprised, because certainly it's always the case when I play a caster. I would not be surprised that like players don't necessarily know for sure what school of magic all their spells are.
Yeah. And
I'm not saying that to criticize players. I'm saying that because like the schools are kind of nonsense. Like
yeah, they're kind of all over the place.
So I think it's totally reasonable that you wouldn't know them. Like certainly I don't.
Yeah.
And they're always a little, and there's always one or two weird ones. So yeah. So
cool. I like that.
So that's cool. So I think the only thing I will say is I think this teacher, at least for the moment, maybe lacks a reason to fight the party other than the party have kicked in the door of the stronghold and are just cutting through wave after wave of assassin.
Of young assassins. They've killed all the younglings.
They were killing younglings. It's like no, they're like teenagers who've gutted people. It's fine. Like they're not innocent. They're not like, we are training them to kill people.
Yes.
But like, but yeah, like, so I don't know what reason we can think of. I mean, I think a really cool, obvious reason is the party have a very powerful spellcaster. And ultimately the Maw, even if they do have a bad limp, and like you can just represent by saying that they just have half speed, right? They only have 15 feet of movement, or maybe they have 15 feet, but they get the monk bonus, but maybe the monk bonus is half, so they end up with somewhere in the region of like 20-25 feet. So they're still kind of fast, but like I think it would be
surprisingly fast for someone who has like maybe a peg leg,
absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say like they shouldn't be at 30 feet, because at that stage you didn't need to give them a limp. They should be they should be 25 or lower, and whether that works out because of the level of monk they are or whatever, it almost doesn't matter. They need to be slower than a normal party member because their limp is part of their character. And
agreed.
And I like, well, obviously you can just go, well, their limp isn't part of their character anymore. That whole problem is solved, which is fine. But I actually like this. I like this character arc we have of
making the character's characteristics be mechanical.
Exactly. Yeah. So they are a little slow, but they are a high level monk, which means they're evasive, and they have like cool like flurries of punches, and they have the ability to they get that ability to walk on water that monks get later, even if they do it slightly slower.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that. They can do big jumps. Obviously, which monks big ups for all the points. And And so maybe like, you have, maybe in fact what could be cool is like maybe the simulacra that are of this person, they also have the ability to drain magic with their punches, but they're not as good as the Maw is, right? The Maw is the master of this style. Totally. And so like if the party have like this wizard who has just kicked the shit out of other assassins, maybe they decide, all right, well, we have to send them all after them. And that's even cool in its own way, because like I think it's fair to say that like whenever the guild sends someone important after the party, they are risking that person. So like it's interesting to think like if they are sending them all, maybe like who else do they send with them all? Like, presumably they send assassins obviously to accompany them because they don't want to lose them all. But like maybe there's like, maybe his students, the ones who are able to drain magic, or students of the Grand Master who have like a different fighting style, but like it helps that they're there or whatever. Or maybe even they send the Shadow Knight, and the Shadow Knight's only job is to actually keep them all safe. And he only gets involved, the Shadow Knight only gets involved if like the Maw starts to lose the fight. And the Shadow Knight only steps in to get the Maw out. And maybe that's how the party first meet the Shadow Knight.
Yeah. Or maybe the Shadow Knight is there to distract the rest of the party while the Maw deals with this one character.
That's cool too. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we have a Grandmaster who is a powerful high-level rogue, very dangerous, slightly arrogant, leads a double life, doesn't necessarily like to rely on magic, but doesn't necessarily hate magic. We've got their second, who is the Eye Socket, which is their priest who maybe can see limited visions of the future and divine the fates, but also has like more practical things like just healing people, or like giving them a blessing before they go out to kill someone, things like that, and all that's very practical. And they have a ward, which is a paladin of the god of death, a Shadow Knight, a very, very powerful and unusual person who has this unique gift. And they're maybe a little more conflicted about their role in the world, but for now they serve these two masters who occasionally come at odds because of how they want to use the Shadow Knight. And the Shadow Knight is, in a very real way, just being used by the two of them for now. And maybe they are the person who can be turned by the party based on their actions.
That's kind of one of the core ideas that I had for my dude as well.
Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got from what you described. Yeah, and I like the idea of keeping that, and I do like the idea of especially like kind of the lieutenants of the big bads being not necessarily 100% loyal, and like that room for like, they could betray the bad guy and work for the party, or betray the bad guy but not work for the party and just not like anyone and then become their own villain, or they could like betray the bad guy, work with the party, then betray the party and become a bad guy. And like all the room there is great, like all depending on like the actions of the party, the actions and what suits the game and everything. But I love that space. I think it's really cool, and it's very what's the word, it has this excellent sense of like it leads onto itself very well, like you have this character who plays many different roles over the course of the game, but like you always know who they are. So like there's this kind of there's this good like kind of arc to it, I suppose.
And maybe he shouldn't be too high a level. So like if you were to encounter him specifically,
I saw him.
Excuse me. I saw him. Got out of stone. But so like this guy, like maybe you essentially save him from the Assassin's Guild and from this terrible fate that seems to be befalling him pretty early on with your interactions with the Assassin's Guild. Yeah. Because like if you're going to deal with the guild master, the Grand Maw, that's going to be late game stuff. Yeah. Like the lieutenant is probably going to be snatched away from them pretty early game. Like you're not going to be able to use him immediately to turn on the bad guys. So maybe this Assassin's Guild could even end up being kind of a campaign, essentially, or a secondary campaign that is kind of like in the shadow of whatever primary quest is going on. But maybe that could kind of detract from. I'm not sure how to use this Assassin's Guild anymore. I've kind of confused myself, but it's cool to have it there for sure.
Well, I think in the in the in the purview of Villain Squad is not necessarily how you use them, but more who they
Or where
are
you use
and
them.
what they do,
Yeah.
so that you can use them if they suit. And I do like the idea that you could pull out any individual member of this squad and start using them somewhere else.
Yes.
So yeah, so I know what you mean. Like, it's not clear whether we're building a campaign or just a list of bad guys. But I think the answer is basically both, because I think most campaigns are driven by the bad guys
Yeah.
doing something and the party trying to stop them or failing, or
Yeah.
doing something unrelated and accidentally getting involved in the villain, all of which is hilarious. So I think it's fair to say that, like, whatever happens.
Yeah.
But to go back to our squad summary so far,
Yes.
just very briefly, and the final person who we didn't mention originally is the Maw, who is the sort of teacher, it would be fair to say, like, they teach the initiates and do most of the teaching.
Yeah.
And they have some simulacra, and they are a monk. If you were interested in using the player's handbook, which I mean, you could, I wouldn't bother, because it would mean reading more rules. But the Way of Shadows is obviously very appropriate thematically, and gives them access to some useful abilities. But the main thing is that they are sort of the mage hunter in the guild, and they have a unique fighting style which is called Eldritch Absentia, which lets them pull magic from the bodies of magic users. And their students, who maybe aren't as experienced, can't necessarily pull the magic from your body, but they can at very least sort of stop you from having as easy a time casting spells. If you wanted to, sorry, go on.
Maybe he was recognized by the Grandmaster for his abilities, and the Grandmaster is the one that, no, probably not, that would cause too much tension. But, like, I was going to say maybe the Grandmaster is the one that caused his limp or took his leg or something, but that might be a bit much. But maybe the Guildmaster recognized his ability to take away other users' magic and kind of lent a bit on that for a bit, and maybe he even uses the Maw as a threat against our cleric friend every once in a while.
Yeah,
like,
true.
Relatively innocently initially, but, like, it is a legitimate threat to any magic user that this guy is around.
Yeah,
anybody who knows his ability is going to be kind of unnerved around him,
Yeah, I mean, I think some cool powers to give him to kind of play on that fighting style. Just briefly, I wanted to touch on the ideas I had. So obviously we have the idea of, like, making disadvantage on concentration checks, draining spell slots, or banning spells or schools of magic. You could have a cool thing where when the Maw pulls your spell slots out of you, they regain key points, so they're literally becoming more powerful. Although that's kind of dangerous, because that is a death spiral, as in it's a mechanic where you lose something and the bad guy gains something, so now they're better and you're worse, but you're more worse and they're more better, so that's just bad. But of course, there is always an element of that in some design, so so just be careful. But another kind of more safe mechanic certainly would be something like just a really simple rule that, like, if the person that they are hitting can cast spells, they just take a bit of extra damage. It could just be like, oh yeah, whenever he makes an unarmed strike, or let's say unarmed strike. Let's say that the Maw relies on unarmed strike. They're very traditional monk. You could say, like, whenever the Maw makes an unarmed strike against a target, if that target has the ability to cast spells, they take an extra, D6 necrotic damage, right? Something that's like, it isn't nothing, but a lot of the time it won't be a lot. You won't necessarily go, that's the reason we lost the fight. It's because of his extra D6s. It'll be like, oh yeah, that made him more dangerous, and it made me, because I'm a wizard, be like, oh gosh, this guy's more dangerous. But then, like, the fighter steps in and, shield bashes him away, and it's like, it's okay now, because, like, the party's dealing with it. But that idea that, like...
And that he cuddles the mage and starts stroking his hair. It's okay. You're safe
okay.
now.
You're safe now. So yeah, those could be kind of cool. I think the idea of, like, little damage dealing bonuses, especially against certain things, is kind of cool and is a nice way. It's almost like a callback to the sort of old Bane rules, right? Where like you could have like maybe you could even do something like that. You could literally give him power called like Caster's Bane, where it's like, oh, when he attacks a magic user, he deals an extra d6 damage. You know, like in
I think there is a feat called like Mage Slayer or something in the player's handbook. That
yeah,
does
actually there is. Maybe you could give him some of the benefits of that. I think it's like stuff like you can opportunity attack people when they try to cast spells and stuff like that. So maybe that ability would be kind of cool for him. But you do want to avoid giving him too many abilities because, well, I guess it depends on the kind of DM you are. But certainly I would, because even your most interesting villains, well, maybe they can upstage the party, but like you should never feel that like running your villains is a hassle. Generally, you should enjoy running them, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool. So we got them all, and they're also the tutor, and they kind of teach the other knights. Sorry, not the other knights, the other assassins. Okay, so I feel like what? Sorry.
That's a good core. Like this is the kind of essential hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like we have these 4 to 5, and then if we were to kind of like maybe there are other like guild like heads to various different places, but I think that's a solid core.
Yeah.
Also, we're at an hour and 15 minutes at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, yeah, the only other thing I was going to touch on, I think you are right. I think this is a good core of like 4 people, and they're kind of they have. There's an interesting thing where like we have the 3 characters who are all linked in a way in a conflict. I don't know if we want to get them more involved in that conflict. Because the Maw obviously like is the teacher of assassins, so maybe the Maw taught the Shadow Knight. And so maybe in a way you could have an interesting dichotomy where the Maw is the only one who kind of almost knows the Shadow Knight, if that makes sense. Depending on how you want to play it, obviously, but you could have it that like the cleric, the cleric and the guildmaster are really only interested in them as a tool, and then because the Maw had to like teach them to become an assassin, they kind of got to know them a bit or saw more of who they are.
Had to understand the person to be able to teach them as effectively as they wanted to.
Even if
because maybe the head, the guild head, and the cleric like leaned on the Maw, being like, "You need to train this guy extra good.
Yeah,
he's our head honcho. He's our big man."
Oh, I got you.
Yeah.
This one is special. That kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's really cool. I like that. So you could play in that space, and maybe like, make them all sort of slightly more sympathetic. You could make it a more obvious battle by saying something like the Maw is completely loyal to the guildmaster, completely loyal to the Grand Maw, right? Like has very little affection for the cleric, and therefore would be, if ordered to do so, very happy to remove them.
Yeah.
And that immediately makes that threat a lot more real.
Yes.
And I kind of like that as well, because that's tense, It is maybe slightly obvious, but it is.
Yeah.
It's good in an obvious way.
What I was getting at. Yeah. Totally. Like it's very like I was saying, he is a threat to any magic user, and if he is close with the other guy who is also not a magic user, then that makes perfect sense that they want to be able to have this one-upmanship and have the actual upper hand just kind of dangling over the magic user's head.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah. So this is cool. I like this kind of 4-man band we got. It's there's a nice kind of, they're all linked in interesting ways, and they all kind of don't like each other in fun ways. There's always conflict between 2. If you had any 2 of them in a room, there would be a conflict, and I think that's a really good sign.
Yeah, except for maybe the teacher and the student, because they're probably relatively buddy, but have like a professional distance.
Maybe no,
like,
yeah,
hey,
I do think that there's I do think I like to think at least that there's a distance between that the paladin sees them. Sorry, when you say teacher and student, do you mean the paladin and the maw, or do you mean the paladin and the cleric?
The paladin and the maw.
Right, but yeah, that's fair. Well, I suppose the way I would see it is that like the maw trained the paladin, but to do so, the maw had to adopt their normal persona of quite like rough, but actually they know the paladin quite well. So there's a disconnect between how the paladin thinks the maw sees them versus how they actually see them.
Yeah.
And maybe even the fact that the paladin has this, the Shadow Knight has this like special status in the guild, right? They're kind of the best assassin, right? Like they're the sort of like
the golden boy.
Yeah, the golden boy, exactly. Like maybe they kind of feel a little bit of arrogance towards the teacher, like there's nothing more you can teach me, that kind of thing of like I'm already better than you, like, and you have this stupid limp, right? Like you're past your prime. Like I'm the future, you're the past. So you could play on that, right? You can deliberate, because here's the thing, they're all assassins, they're probably all evil, or at the very least neutral. So you can make them all slightly bad people who don't necessarily get on very well, and in a way that's cooler for the party, because it makes it because like if they were all buddy and really like loyal to each other, it just means the party is fighting another party. Whereas like if the party are like, okay, well there's a guild of assassins, but actually we met the tutor and he like ambushed us, but he didn't actually attack us. He just basically like said, if you help me take out this other member of the guild, like, I'll clean your debt, right? Like I'll maybe there's some kind of like, big scorecard of all the people they're going to kill. And he's like, I can get you off that list if you do what I say. Like I can call in a few favors with the guild because I'm, one of the head honchos. So you have to help me do this thing. And maybe part of doing that thing is like ambushing another guild member or whatever.
That'd be cool. Or like he tells them who their next target is, and then they go specifically to protect that person, and then they take out whatever assassin.
Yeah, and or even like, right, like they don't even necessarily take out these. So let's say the Shadow Knight gets sent out for someone, and like then the maw tells the party the Shadow Knight's going to come after this person. The party don't even necessarily kill the Shadow Knight; they just protect the person. So the mission is a failure. So like as far as the assassins are concerned, like the important thing is we failed. It's not about whether we lost someone or not, or maybe it is to an extent. But you know what I mean? Like the idea of like that failure is a massive dishonor, and like that's kind of a strike against the golden boy as far as like the guild is concerned, and that kind of idea of like bringing him down a peg.
Like it's a political move essentially within the world that the guys
that
the players won't really interact with.
And even cool. Like the idea that like there's kind of a fun dichotomy where like the guild see it as a political thing, but the party are like, oh my god, someone's gonna die, right? Like because they're heroes. They care about people. That's their fatal flaw.
That's what they do. It's their shtick.
So the idea that the party will intervene because they believe this person deserves to live, and the guild will like a guild member will compromise the own guild's attack purely as a move to like screw over another guild member. I really like that. That's very.
I'm imagining like a couple days after the attempted assassination, the party is just kind of like counting the money after being paid for protecting the guy, and they're like, oh, this went really well. And then it cuts away to the Assassin's Guild with everything in chaos, and people just screaming, like throwing paper around. What are we gonna do? And then cutting back to like 37, 38. What do we do? Who do we have? Who could take him out?
It's like it's like the start of Halo 2. Do you remember the start of Halo 2? Is that a good reference?
No, I've only played Halo 3.
Okay, well, the start of Halo 2, I actually really like it. Basically,
I'm going to play through the Halos with my wife.
I would recommend them. They are really good co-op campaigns. The start of Halo 2 is the main character from Halo 1, Mr. Chief. He is getting a medal for blowing up Halo and stopping the destruction of something. I can't remember. I don't know what. I think Halo was going to blow up Earth, but maybe not. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. But the point is that he is being given a medal in a big ceremony for all of his work. And at the exact same time, the Arbiter, who is like the new character who you play as for like some of the campaign, is being reprimanded for the exact same thing. He's being reprimanded because he failed to protect Halo. And like he was commander of the forces, and he's being stripped of his rank and publicly shamed. So there's this fun thing where the Master Chief is getting new armor put on him. The Arbiter is getting armor taken off him. the Master Chief is being promoted and given medals. The Arbiter is being reprimanded and stripped of his rank and publicly shamed.
That's cool duality.
And it's like, obviously, like, maybe it's slightly obvious, but I honestly thought, like, it's well shot. The voice acting is really well intercut. So there's a bit where, like, one of them says, like, for the act of destroying the super weapon Halo, and then it cuts to the aliens and he says there can be no greater dishonor. So, like, the idea of, like, that dichotomy is played very directly into the dialogue. So it's actually it's a pretty cool scene. So yeah, that kind of thing.
Cool. I'm into it. That kind of stuff happening. Like, players are only going to know the good side.
Yeah, of course.
In your head, you're like seeing this person being reprimanded, or the chaos in the Assassin's
or
Guild. We've never not fulfilled the contract. What's going on?
Yeah, or you can even, depending on the kind of party, you could do something really cool. You could write up a scene, right? You could literally write up, meanwhile, in the Fortress of Doom, and after the game, give it to your party and give them an idea of, like, well, for you, the day was like this, but this is what it was like for them.
Yeah.
Just to get a feel for the world and what it's like and the difference.
Yeah. Because, well, that's fair. My instinct would be to just keep it to myself, but, that's kind of unfair. Like, I'm getting more and more okay with the idea of sharing my world with people, because, if it is just my world, it's a very insular thing. But if I share my excitement with our little community here, or with you guys, or with whoever I'm playing with, then, like, that gives, like, credence to it almost. Like, not that I can't enjoy myself by myself, but, like, that's a cool way to kind of share it.
Yeah,
like, because you want the characters to love the world and to know that it is a deep world and not just
and that they're
session to session.
The idea that, like, when you stop playing, it's not like a video game and it turns off. Like, there's kind of still wheels turning. That idea that, like, the world is, like, it's not real, but it's a little more real than a video game. It's a little more interesting. There's a little more nuance and a little more subtlety, and maybe, like, there is kind of a slight continuation that means that it's not 100% unreal, and that's interesting in its own way.
Mm-hmm. Like, I like working depth into my world, which is kind of why I work very hard to write it all in, like, to have stuff written down that kind of will happen,
Yeah.
It's cool. It's fun.
It is
I
cool.
think it would be cool to share that stuff. Unless it's like a spoiler.
Yeah.
For something that might happen.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a pretty good villain squad.
I think that's a good, solid core for an Assassin's Guild. And then outside of that, you will have, Assassin A, Assassin 1, Assassin Roman numeral 1.
Yeah. You'll have, like you'll have kind of a core of assassins. I think if you want to keep them elite, I wouldn't necessarily have too many assassins at once.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of the city, I might say something like 24 fully trained assassins, and half as many initiates, that sort of thing. And
maybe like a groundskeeper that does have like a giant beast that it tends to keep, like, random, like,
sewer
people
monsters
from
in check.
straying too close.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like, they'll have a giant wolf or even like a dragon, or maybe they're a necromancer and they just raise corpse demons.
Yeah, true.
Or
that's cool.
Corpse golems.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of the sort of structure and bureaucracy of an Assassin's Guild, they also have people on the outside, people like merchants, probably posing as merchants, but merchants, innkeepers, like people who hang around places where lots of people talk to each other about stuff. And so places to pick up information or leads for people who might be interested. And then I think, because we're saying that this stronghold is deep underground, it's very well hidden, we probably also need, like, fronts, a couple of places where people know to go to get word to the assassins.
Yeah.
Maybe like
specific places, and then, like, they'll have, like, code words and stuff, or code phrases.
So maybe they have, like, a guy in a members only club, right? So, like, sort of a noble, like, tavern, like a noble, basically gentleman's club or whatever. And the idea that, like, because it's a very discreet place for the wealthy, the idea that maybe, like, a kind of a permanent fixture there is a member of the Assassin's Guild who you can kind of get word to if you want someone dealt with.
Cool. Yeah.
So that kind of
thing. And then, like, messengers and stuff as well. Like,
messengers, couriers.
Just been paid off. Yeah, couriers.
People they paid off. I think the idea of, like, they are in good, or they have paid off a lot of temples so that they can access the catacombs from their grounds easily.
Yeah.
So like
and then people who just keep their mouth shut, like people who take the money, do the job, then forget whatever it was.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like you
people with plausible deniability.
Yeah, and people who just know better than to get involved, like whatever, like cart drivers and like people who deliver food and things like that, who are just like it's not worth it. Like,
Yeah.
This is good money, and I don't have to think too hard about it, and I can keep my family fed. And even that's a cool way for the party to learn about it, and the person to be like, please, for the love of God, don't make sure they never know that I told you, because if they do, they will come after me and my family. And maybe then they do, and the party have to deal with that, depending on the kind of tone of your game. Like, literally, it's like, no. Like, we don't tell very many people where we are, so we know who told, and so we dealt with them. We dealt with people who talk in the only way we deal with everything. And then the party are like, oh, that was us, that was our fault. And it's like,
oh, shit.
It's just like, they just have to confront that. It's like, was that good? Do you feel like it was important enough to do it that way? Or like, could you have done more to protect these people? But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, like giving it a bit of depth and a little bit of like, it's fun to play the just kind of rompy, like, oh, let's go on a wee adventure. But if you present a deeper campaign to your players off the bat, then have that kind of stuff in it. Like, give them a deeper experience.
Yeah.
Present them with it first, though. Otherwise, they'll be expecting a fun romp through monster territory where they just kill stuff. And then suddenly they're hit with assassins, and they're like, what? Our favorite NPC just died.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I think we said before, if you tell your players ahead of time what they're getting into, they will almost always be up for it.
Totally.
At least that's
100%.
Our experience so far.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny how, like, DC, being the very humble man that he is, didn't say that, like, the reason he realized that is because he suggested what he thought was like a dumb, silly campaign, and we all voted for what campaign we were most interested in, and his won. Like, his got the most votes. And it was a great concept. I won't spoil it because he's not here, and I don't think it's fair to tell anyone about it. But basically, like, he was like, oh, this is sort of a silly idea that I don't really have a lot of, like, substance behind. But, like, everyone was like, that idea is so cool, I'm already invested.
Totally.
And
like I think those ideas just come to him, and then he's like, what about this? And everyone's like, hell yeah.
Everyone's literally like, that sounds so cool, I would play that. And he goes, oh, right.
Yeah, like, he has incredible instinct for just straight up ideas.
Absolutely.
I hope his ear is burning.
Yeah, good man. All right.
Cool.
My throat is dying. We need to stop.
All right. So thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to this episode of Villain Squad, the Assassin's Guild. We are Creature Club. We have our Creature Club website, creatureclubpodcast.com, where you can contact us with your own various assassin ideas, which I think, we brushed on a couple of little ideas, but like the idea of a person who kills is so broad. Like, you guys can definitely come up with some cool stuff. So
yep, I didn't even mention on my setting specific dudes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we each have a couple more behind the curtain that we want to keep to ourselves, but we also wanted to present you with some idea fodder. So if you can shoot some back to us, we're going to be doing another homebrew episode at some point in the future, and we would love to hear some more assassin ideas. You can submit those to our Gmail account, I believe, creatureclubpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to our RSS feed via our website.
Via our website, yeah, absolutely.
And you can just peruse all of our previous back catalogue of the last year.
Yeah.
And
it's all there.
Be...
You can review us on iTunes or anywhere else you're able to post reviews. We've finally figured out how to look at them, which is really cool. Yeah. So thank you to everyone who's written for review. They're actually all really nice.
They are all, like, you're all absolutely lovely people. I actually want to look it up and thank the first person who ever reviewed us, which is really early on.
Yeah,
I noticed.
Actually,
Creature
long
Club
before
podcast.
We asked.
before we
Yeah.
but so the first review was by McSnoodleton1 via Apple Podcasts in the United States of America on the
Greatest country on
29th
earth.
of January. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
29th of January 2018. And gave us a 5-star review, the title of which is Good Stuff. And they said, these guys are easy to listen to and I enjoy the real world lore they present for the D&D monsters. It's kind of like a mythological history lesson, but fun. And that was while we were still kind of getting on our feet, trying to establish ourselves. And like to see that even now, basically 9 months later, is so touching. Like,
yeah, it is.
It's incredible that back then, like, you guys wanted to listen to us. And I, just for the sake of it, I would like to read out like a couple of reviews that you guys have left us, because like it is so heartwarming. I'd read them all out now, but I feel like that's a bit much.
Well, maybe we'll do one an episode or something, so we don't get big heads.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening. You're all absolutely wonderful. And I have been Tim.
Wait, we forgot one last thing. Sorry.
Did we?
Yeah, it's fine. It's new, so it's very reasonable.
Oh.
We finally started a Twitter.
Indeed.
Because someone asked us to. So it is at Creature Club Pod. You can find it on the Twitter, the place where all the Twitters are. It's basically we just post episode links at the moment. But if we get followers, we'll probably use it for other stuff, like do like queries. If you have episode ideas, that's a great place to submit them, because we can go back and check later.
That was Christopher Stewart who gave us the idea for the podcast, for the Twitter.
Yeah,
very quickly becoming another patron saint.
Yeah, Jesus. I'll be like a Catholic pantheon soon.
Is that us?
That is absolutely everything. Yes.
Fantastic. So again, thank you all for listening. I have been Tim.
And I've been Dan.
Can you do a good Mikey's voice?
No, like, especially not with my throat. Oh, it's me,
Stay
Mikey,
cool.
Texas. Stay cool. I don't know. How's that?
Texas.
Is that good?
Pew, pew, pew. Stay cool.
Shoot a cow, dog. Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
We should just get him to say it once into like a phone, so we can just clip it in whenever we need.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll do that.
All right. Have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.